You're listening to Copy Chief Radio. Get all the episodes and join the community at copychief.com.
What's up, friends? Good to have you here. It is me, Kev, with my buddy, Brian McCarthy. Brian, how are you, friend?
I'm doing great. Good to see you, Kev.
Good to see you, man. I'm sure a lot of my listeners know you. You've been on the show several times before. You and I worked together for years, always championed your career. And, you know, you work with a lot of integrity. You've done some innovative stuff. And then, you know, a couple of years ago now, 2-3 years ago, you really fell in love with coaching. And now you're really focused, still doing probably some copywriting, but really.
I haven't written copy for a client in maybe 2 years.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were still kind of had a couple going. So it's just all coaching now. You have a coaching business, McCarthy Mindset Coaching.com. And I want to let everybody know, if you add a /imposter to that, McCarthy Mindset Coaching.com/imposter, Brian has a special report for you, some helpful, a book of sorts, a lead magnet, we might call it, although you're not really selling much more than your coaching and your personal private one-on-one help these days. You like working directly with people. And one of the things you help them overcome is imposter syndrome, which we know is a major, major issue for, I don't know, maybe you have noticed if it's more unique to our industry than others, but it's definitely prominent.
Yeah, I think it's everywhere, but I think there's a special hyper focus among copywriters in the online marketing world.
Is that why? Because it's harder to define and know which lane you're in to gauge your ability?
Yeah, I think that's 100% part of it. Also, you're seeing everyone else being so successful and having all these big numbers and all that stuff. So you think you need that and need to promise that and be that, and anything else is meaningless and you'll just not even get looked at. So I think basically like comparison and what we're seeing and bombarded with in our social media feeds, and even, you know, when we go to conferences and all this stuff, like it just seems like we've got to be at that certain level or we're garbage.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like some of that's universal. We know some of the stats, right, around what social media has done to certainly teens and people, because we really do kind of measure everything with dollars in this industry. For better, we don't always want to. You and I don't really come from that place in life, but we're in an industry where that's what everybody throws out is a measure of where they're at.
Dollars, measure, and speed also of like how quickly did you get all that money?
How do you help people through this? I've come to say a couple things is, number one, get used to it, because I don't know anybody of any level who doesn't still deal with it. And two, I think you might have actually disagreed with me a little on this, which I'd love to go into, that take it kind of as a good sign, because it means you're trying and you're doing stuff and you're pushing yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I used to subscribe to that also until about last year. That's most people in personal growth in these industries, like that's very much the prevalent thing of like, it's going to be there, get used to it. It's a sign of growth. And like the sign of growth, like there's definitely a lot of truth in that. And it being so prevalent also, yeah, certainly true. And so my work used to be more like, hey, let's just learn how to manage it. It's going to come up, and how do you just deal with it and push through? That was what I was doing. That was what I did with myself and my clients. And it was like, hey, let's just reduce 80% of that stress, pressure, fear. And like, that's a huge win. And it is. And then I was working with another coach, this woman, Kavita Singh. She's amazing. I was talking with her because I was giving a talk and I was like, hey, yeah, I felt imposter syndrome coming up because it's always big, successful people. But, you know, I overcame it and did it anyway and felt good. And I was like, yeah, and like, you know, I'm sure that's how it is with you. You have imposter syndrome sometimes, right? And she just laughed in my face. She was just like, what? Are you kidding me? And I was like, wait, what do you mean? Like, I thought I was in a good place with imposter syndrome. And so I worked on it with her. And one of the things that she said that really stuck out to me is, if you've got imposter syndrome, it just means that there's some place that you're lying to yourself. Like there's some lie that you're buying into, whether it's based in like expectations or fear or some belief, Or even the other side that she really helped me with was just like a lack in conviction in what you're doing and what you stand for and what you believe in. I think those are things that we can have a certain degree of it, but then we waver among certain audiences or in certain instances. And so a combination of that, and then like some of these beliefs that, like, oh, I'm not far along to like talk with these people or whatever. And part of us is still buying into that story. So learning to unravel, like it just takes deeper work, I realized, than to like, hey, let's just look at your list of wins and let's, remind yourself of the positive stuff. Like, again, that stuff helps and it can get you to go through it. But there's like a deeper exploration that helps you just unravel that more. And then at that point, like imposter syndrome just isn't even showing up anymore.
So basically, if you remind yourself of what you really stand for, what really matters to you, we do that how? With a list? No, I mean it. Like, how do we take? Because I can definitely identify with the importance of that. It's easy to lose your way when you're not. Because, then somebody will come along. I remember back when I had a need for such a thing, I had a barber. I would leave there walking on air. She had this ability, like she would always marvel at me. I just don't know how you do it. You have these 2 young kids and you're growing this business and it's just amazing. I don't know how. And it was just so natural. And I don't know if it was her shtick or what, but it was very effective because it was like, you're right. I am kind of kicking ass. Right. But how do we do that for ourselves and not feel like we're just going through a task or a routine that we're forcing it?
Totally. Yeah. I love that point because that is the idea. If you want to get to that place where it's so ingrained and embedded that you're not having to wake up every day and say your affirmations and look at your thing and like, remember. So one of it is just like really connecting to that depth of what you're doing. And maybe you can do a bit of that like alone and just kind of like in solitude and connecting to that part inside of you and what that feels like in your body and your conviction in what you're doing. Maybe there can be some journaling and exploring it in that way. And maybe there is a little bit early on of like, oh, right, like I started to wander, doubt myself. But I know that the truth is this. So it's really finding that deeper truth. And like, I wish I had, here's my 6-step formula to do it. But that's, a lot of the steps and the stuff that I have, it can help you get in that direction. Like exactly some of the stuff you're talking about helps you get in that direction. The only way so far I've found to really own that more fully. I mean, for some people, maybe it just happens, or maybe when you just first like step into that conviction, it just happens. But a lot of times we just have like these blind spots of other deeper beliefs and fears that we don't even know are there that are keeping us from fully embodying that conviction, or we just haven't even really looked at our own skills and what we're bringing to the table deep enough, right? Like I worked with a leadership coach a year or 2 ago. She gave me this amazing assessment and just like pointed out all these qualities I have. That's like you help people like get clarity without even trying. Like just you being in the room helps like people get clarity and it gives them confidence to like speak up and own their voice. So it was like, oh, I'm doing these things that I didn't even realize. So that's another part of getting that. It's finding these things in ourselves, skills, gifts, abilities we have that we overlook because they come so naturally to us. Right. And even sometimes it might take a while for it to sink in if we really have that and can believe in it and have conviction in it. And that's part of the guide. I do have like questions that you can ask yourself for some of that deeper exploration for the fears and beliefs and for that deeper conviction. And is that going to, instantly change it forever and do the job? No. Will it move you further? Yes. And then is there some deeper exploration that is kind of unique to everybody that's going to help you really stand in that conviction firmly and dissolve more of those beliefs and fears? Yes, that's as far as I've gotten on this path so far.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, first of all, I respect anybody who is a personal growth coach who admits that they're still on the journey. I think a lot of people say that, but it's almost like wink, wink, but I'm really quite superior. Like I've figured a lot of this out because, there's just no end to the depth of it. Just to take it off a little bit, because I know you've done a lot of deep work. You worked with Brent Charlton for years. I know other people who have been through his coaching and got a lot from it. My guy lately has been James Hollis. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
He's a Jungian psychoanalyst. He's written many, many books, mostly about transitioning through midlife. And so the one that really struck me was The Middle Passage. Without going down a deep rabbit hole of what it is, he essentially talks about there's two adulthoods. There's your first adulthood and your second adulthood, okay? And midlife really is you transitioning into your second adulthood. So the first adulthood is based on your childhood, because what else could it be based on? That's your tribe. That's your whole point of reference for better or worse. You're either trying to get as far away from it as you can, or adhere to it and respect it as much as you can, basically, right? All the roles and expectations that you create and accept for yourself as you're succeeding and going through life and raising a family and doing whatever are all based on that. But then you hit this point and you go, who am I really? Here's the bitch of it, Brian. The thing about having a second adulthood is you have to, number one, accept that you have no idea what it might look like, but you just know that there's something else that you need to go after, even though you don't know what it is, which is about the scariest damn thing you can have to do at a later stage in life, when you've all your identity and everything you've worked for is tied up in your ego and your existence. I guess my question is, how much of it do you see the people you work with directly tied to things that they don't know they're still carrying around, from childhood? And how much better can you do until you really address those things?
I think those things are always going to limit us. They're always, because these things that we don't address, they just keep showing up in different ways. Like you can see it in the journey that a lot of people have in the online business world of like, there's the initial like stress and panic to get the clients. And then it's, I'm overwhelmed with all the work. And then it's, if I just change the business model. And then it's like, I got a new business model, but now it's all this extra work to keep that. It's like the underlying stress and fear and panic, like actually kind of stays with us for so much of the journey. Like it just kind of changes form. And it's like in that other podcast about meaning that I love that you got going up, you hit on that. And that was part of my journey too. Like a lot of my copywriting early on was like this need to prove myself. And that stays with you regardless of the level that you hit. Like the goalposts keep moving. You just keep kind of having that. And that's like one of the things that's we adopt as kids that kind of stays with us. So a lot of these challenges, when we don't address them, they just show up in different ways. Even when we have more success and all these other things, like they keep us from enjoying it, or they just, now our business is going good, but relationships start to slip. It's going to keep coming until we address it. And the cool thing is when you address it, then the path just becomes more peaceful and enjoyable. And that's what like my clients will notice. There are a lot of times they're like, my day doesn't look any different, but it feels so much better. And it's just because of unraveling the stories and all these things from childhood, from years ago, even just from the marketing world or whatever, society, and just freeing ourselves from those makes us freer, makes us lighter. And like that thing, even of like, I know there's something more, but I don't know what, it even like helps us trust that more, or helps us see like, okay, I don't know what, but I know this is the next step, and helps us, feel good about at least the direction that we're moving in the right direction, even if we can't see the finish line or know where it's going.
Yeah. So it's not about, you're going to cure this, or if you start to feel this way, remember that this, and this. It's like just being in it. It's almost like just getting a little better every day. And that's why they say what they're doing hasn't changed much. It just feels better because maybe they're release that pressure valve a little bit.
Because they release the self-imposed pressure of it's got to be perfect. I should be at this level by now. It's all going to fall apart in 3 months. I shouldn't need to work this hard still, or I've just got to keep pushing this. Yeah, so many of these things.
Look, I get it. I know there's so many communities, I'm doing air quotes, communities for entrepreneurs out there, all filled with their own version of overnight experts chirping at you from behind the screen. You got your Facebook groups, your Clubhouse rooms, just experts galore. How often do you feel like you're being pinballed around from thing to thing and picking up a little bit, a little piece there? How much of that is actually making it into your brain and your fingers and your business and affecting your money? How many of these people are actually out there in the field getting their hands dirty and testing to find out what actually works and what flops? Well, in the Copy Chief community, a real community, you get shoulder to shoulder with the most active, successful marketers working in the trenches today, all while learning from industry legends who rarely teach anywhere else, if ever. Copy Chief is an amazing community, super newbie friendly. Also, you'll find, elite level marketers and copywriters in there. They're all working to become the best at their craft, get paid top dollar for their skills, stay ahead of the competition by keeping their finger on the pulse of what's working now. That's the X factor when you're backed up by a community and you can get any question you have answered by people who actually do this stuff and can tell you from real world experience what to do for your project, for your offer, for your funnel, for your clients. Man, you're unstoppable when you've got that kind of confidence. Go check us out at copychief.com/join. If you've never been a member, you're going to see what you've been missing and you're going to say, where has this been all my life? And if you've been a member in the past, I would invite you to come and check out all the new stuff. We've completely updated all the tech. So we're on brand new platforms. Everything is slick and smooth and easy to access. And it's never been better. Copychief.com/join. I'll look for you inside.
I do want to go back and stay on imposter syndrome, since that'll be the theme of this. And I know people really want some answers for this. So I'll share with you. I surveyed my list, as I like to do once a year, in a very simple way. I ask a very specific question. I say, what is the one thing holding you back from achieving what you want with copywriting in 2025? It's worded in such a way that they'll hopefully share what they truly believe is like what comes to mind when you think, because I've tried to be as unleading as possible, not misleading. So got about 50, 60 replies, took out the ones that were flippant, like myself. And so I put it into one file and I loaded that into ChatGPT. And what I find that ChatGPT is very good at is just analyzing a knowledge base that I like to give it. And so, laid out all these different things. And I said, well, if you could put it in one sentence, what everybody said, how would you describe it? And it said, copywriters struggle to attract quality clients, build confidence in their skills, and adapt to evolving market demands while balancing their mindset and productivity, which is really all of it. I mean, it did a good job.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
But it is a lot too, right? So, but without you having that in front of you, quality clients, building confidence, it's almost like you could go backwards from what it laid out and say, well, that you're not going to solve the quality clients thing until you build confidence in your skills. And that's, I think, the evolving market demands thing is like, you have to start with what you do best. And let's find out what that market is. And maybe it'll evolve from there. And then balancing mindset and productivity is just, I think, something every human deals with, right? But for you, when you hear a statement like that, where would you start with somebody who came to you,
Yeah, I think mindset and confidence, which is part of how you overcome imposter syndrome, is the other side of imposter syndrome, basically, is confidence. That solves a lot of those problems. That solves productivity. People don't realize that, but it does to a huge degree. Like a lot of clients I work with, they have imposter syndrome, and that causes them, and I had this myself too, now you're spending 3 hours on something you could have done in 1 hour because you don't trust yourself, you don't trust your skills, and you're overriding and you're doing all these things. Or it just makes you do all this scattershot stuff because you don't believe in what you're doing. So confidence actually is a huge productivity piece that people don't realize. I help clients free up all the time, just by getting more confidence and clarity in where they're going. Yeah, so that's what I would say to that part of confidence solves a lot of those issues. And the problem is we base confidence on things outside of ourselves when I have more experience, when I have more wins and all these things. And that's what I'm saying, like shifting the focus to get more conviction in like what you do have and what you do bring to the table and what you can do, even outside of copywriting, and really seeing and owning the value of that. Really explore it more thoroughly, journal about it more thoroughly to really like see the full picture and view of the value that you bring. And then also being honest with it. So people come from this place that then you feel like you got a posture, you feel like you got to come off like this big shot. And that creates imposter syndrome also. Whereas, like you mentioned at the beginning of this interview, I'm not coming in being like, so let me come down from the top of the mountain and share what I got. Like, no, I'm still moving through stuff too. You know, I've done more in certain places than a lot of other people, but you know, there's still plenty I'm learning, still plenty more layers I got to go. And I actually love it because I love the journey. Yeah. But yeah, like, you know, just being honest about where you're at and seeing the value, not just seeing, but feeling and really owning the value of that. Then there isn't that internal mismatch. Like, if you're really coming from a place of truth and honesty, and you're really seeing the value in what you're bringing, and you know, you're not making big promises and guarantees, you're just saying like, this is what I know, and I know the value of it, and like, it can help you do this thing, and I'm going to do the best I got. Like, if you're coming from that place, there's no room for imposter syndrome to sneak in.
That's a great point. That shows up a lot. We do this thing called the goods. It's like The Voice or American Idol for copywriting, right? So we'll have a great client. We did it for Rich Sheffrin and we've done it for Jeff Walker. And about 50 copywriters will essentially compete for those jobs. But the real value is, of course, getting coached on each step of essentially this interview process. And it's always intriguing and surprising who stands out, who gets ultimately chosen and why. But the one thing that rings true through all of it is you just truly have to be yourself. Because if you do posture or try to guess what they want to see, even if you win, you're hired under false pretenses. And you're going to show up eventually.
Yeah.
That's going to be a problem.
Yeah. And now you've got to like play this role and put on this costume every day of the person to be, and that's exhausting, and that's another cause of burnout.
It makes me want to explore Todd Herman's thing a little bit. Why can't I think of the name of it? The alter ego. Where does that fit into what we're saying here? Because I get his thing as like, you know, the greatest example are the sports players who like really built a persona to go out. They're really nice people and kind of mild-mannered off the field, but they're killers on the field. But if you don't have, like, they have a 3-hour game on Sunday, like say football players, and then they can kind of be themselves the rest of the week. If you've got to show up to your job being that all the time, it is going to get exhausting. So do you think there's like a line that you just don't cross that? Or?
Well, I think Todd's thing really comes from, you create this alter ego, but it's just based on a truth that's in you, something that you do actually have inside of you. And you're just kind of giving it more permission and accessing it more. Like, you're just allowing yourself to be it. So I don't think his stuff is really about like, put on this charade. I think it's more about like, let's find this other part of you that just hasn't been getting watered and attention, and bring this out. And then, you know, and we have certain visualizations and things that we connect it to.
Totems and things, that spark it,
So, I think that's kind of the best version of, and again, I'm not super familiar with his stuff. I've read his book a couple of times, and I love Todd. He's amazing, but I think that's really the best version. I think it gets a little wonky when people don't realize that part of it, and they do put it on the like, okay, I'm going to play a role of this, like, I'm this, you know, big shot copywriter or whatever, but actually I don't believe it, but I'm just going to like, you know, force myself into it. That's where it can start to get heavy and exhausting. And stressful.
I guess we see that the most online and in social media and in Facebook groups and things. It's you can just really spot it from the surface. It's people who are like showing up to every thread and saying some buzzwords, and but you're like, which just adds to the problem. That's very interesting, man. I'm going to dive in again into something that just like loneliness, man.
Oh, yeah.
Because we know that this is a lonely job in a lot of ways, because we do a lot of it by ourselves, and hopefully we have, you know, a community in places where we can sort of get help in other eyes and sort of have buddies. But a lot of writer types, at least we know, are introverted and tend to not be as social as might be helpful to them. And, loneliness is now an epidemic, I'm sure you know, officially labeled a mental health epidemic. And in my own experience of being a lot more alone than I have been through most of my adult life recently, I wonder if you have sort of some research or have experienced, because you live alone. Do you live alone, or you have? And so, yeah, you're very good at being alone. As long as I've known you, you've kind of been
a little too good at times. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think maybe that part of might be why you got in improv a little bit, to force yourself. Yeah. So I'm just interested in your experience with loneliness and being alone and navigating yourself as a solo person, as a no plus one in your life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, doing improv, like that became such a great social network for me. And improv itself just like helped me kind of express all these different parts of me that wasn't getting much attention. So that's been huge. Playing Dungeons and Dragons with my college friends every 2 weeks. That part's huge. Doing like co-working stuff every now and then. Yes, and I am someone who, does pretty good by himself, is happy to see nothing on the calendar and no obligations, nowhere to be. It can be a detriment at some points because I can like it too much, and then I haven't talked to anyone for 4 days, and then I get grumpy. And that's part of what, like you said, got me into improv. So, and improv, like sometimes with finding the right social group, like that can just take some trial and error, right? Like there's certain things I've joined and it's like, man, I'm just not clicking with anybody. Man, I'm not clicking with anybody. Man, I've got 6 improv friends and I didn't even have to try or anything. That's interesting. So yeah, I think that's a really big part of it. And also this still ties to imposter syndrome because like you said, we put on these different roles and we show up in ways that we think we want people to be. Like, I got to show up as this, professional, and I got to show up as having it all together. I guess like we show up in these ways that we think we need to be. And that blocks us having genuine connection with people. And that exacerbates the loneliness. So it's like you can still have people around you and friends and all these things, but it's like, but you're not showing them the real you, and you're not connecting on a meaningful way beyond, sports and video games or whatever, which is, all great, but if, especially for men, right? Men are out there like sharing what's really going on in their life very often. Yep. They've got no one to do it with, or maybe like one person, even women too. I think, they often get into a place of like, they got a partner, but it's like, but I don't want to dump everything on them all the time.
Yeah. Right.
So having these spaces where you can take the masks off and just really show up as yourself. That's one of the beautiful things I love about coaching too. It's like it's a safe place to share these parts of us that we repress and like hide away and don't think are okay. And when we share them in an environment where we're not judged or shamed or anything, it's just like accepted. And it's happened in Supergroup too. Like I know in your coaching programs, it happens as well, where people can like let these parts out, be accepted, and then they feel like more full and more whole and more themselves because they don't have to be ashamed of this thing and tuck it away anymore. So those are also pieces of, feeling more yourself. And I could go on, but I'll stop there because that's
no, it's great. Yeah. I'm sort of like exploring with, it's one of those things you have to force a little bit. Like, I think it's probably important for most people, like you did, you committed to classes or whatever, and now you're in troops and
yep,
it's a part
I committed to classes. I was terrified of showing up every time. I was terrified of every performance for the first year, maybe year and a half. So yeah, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. And I just said like yes to every single opportunity that came to me through improv. Yeah. I got very fortunate and just kind of like things were like really just took off in that area. It was really cool.
Like you said, it clicked. It felt like, it's scary, but it's also rewarding. So it's worth it. You had motivation to get past the trepidation. For me, it's like I'm just got to join some things because I'm not much of a joiner, but like whenever I've done any kind of exercise, any kind of kickboxing classes or those things, it's always very gratifying. Especially if you do it continuously, because first of all, I think it's super valuable to be the new person, especially if you are a coach or a leader of any way. It's like really important to remember how it feels emotionally to be out of place, sort of like don't know what to do with your hands in the room and you don't know where anything is. And it's just intimidating, But then you show up for the fifth class and you're answering questions for other people. And after a year, you're sort of one of the leaders, and it's just a really healthy evolution. But it's also got to click. So I just wonder, there's no scale for this, but how much did you stay determined to do something and then until for sure it's just not for me? Because at least if you do that, if it's not harmful in any way, you're learning how to do that. And then you can just do it for something else that might click more. Just being in the practice of seeing things through up to a certain degree. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's important to, again, like that's internal work of like knowing like when are you lying and when are you bullshitting yourself, and seeing your patterns of the past of like, when do things click and work out? And what are those situations like? And are there things that maybe you did bail a little early on? And yeah, I think that's, again, not like a general rule for everyone. Like everyone sees something through for a month and then decide like,
right.
Sure, I don't know, I guess it's a fine guideline. But I think it can be more powerful if you notice those patterns in yourself and how they go. And yeah, really being honest with yourself of like, am I just bullshitting myself because I'm scared? And I'd especially look for like, is there a part of me when I do this that I feel like freer, more expansive, more fully myself? Like, is there a little glimmer of that? That's what I got from improv. After doing a show, I was so terrified of doing a show, and I got off stage and I was like, this is the most alive I've felt in so long. Like, there's something here. And that's, that was the moment I was hooked. Jiu-jitsu, I remember just seeing someone do this move where you do like, if someone's sitting on top of you and you just roll over and now you're on top. And I was like, that's magic. That is absolute magic. Show me your ways. I'm in. Like, that's how it goes for me.
It's interesting between those two things. It just occurred to me. One of them has a system for advancing and one of them kind of doesn't. It's more social. Like it was the same with stand-up. I had that same exact feeling the first time I walked up. It was terrifying, invigorating. Well, I'll be chasing this for a while. Like I want this feeling more. It's like a drug, right? And then you kind of know that you're getting better, and you get these occasional compliments from other comics who aren't real big on giving compliments, and so you can gauge it. But with jiu-jitsu and any martial art, there's belts, and you work hard for that belt, but you know whether you're advancing or not based on the color of your belt.
Well, you also very often feel like you're not advancing, and then all of a sudden you get a couple stripes or something. Improv has a little bit of that. Like they got classes for a while, and then like, yeah, you're very much off on your own. It's like the growth is more yourself, and you hire coaches who can point out areas that you can grow, or you just watch shows and like, oh man, I'm not very good at slowing things down. Maybe I'll work on that. So yeah, it's a little bit more, definitely more self.
Work on my accents.
Yeah. Similar to like being a freelancer, right? Versus, being in a corporate job where you got that structure.
Right.
Freelancers is more like, figure out your path, yo. Like, how do you want to work?
We don't give ourselves quarterly reviews or raises or Well, this has been great, Brian. I want to leave people with something a little tangible. I know, and they definitely need to just go get your guide. But if somebody's listening and they're like, Kev, give me something out of this episode that I can immediately do, what can they do tomorrow when they wake up to help with their imposter syndrome?
This I got from Rhonda Britton, who trained me in my coaching. When those thoughts come up, ask if you're making them up or if they're true. Look for the evidence for versus against them. Just challenge yourself. If you just get in that habit, because again, it's all based in lies that we're telling ourselves that we're buying into, that we don't stop in and look at close enough for various reasons. And when we look at them closely, they start to fall apart. So if you start that practice of knowing, oh, just because it's a thought doesn't mean it's real. And then you question the validity of it, the evidence behind it. You ask yourself that question, you look for evidence either way, and even start to explore, like, this is maybe more advanced than too much, but like, what's a deeper truth in the situation, right? What's another story that you could be telling yourself that's actually more true? That might be a bit trickier to just kind of do on your own, but that first step of just examining the truth of these thoughts and beliefs can help dismantle them. And I also just wanted to point out that you coached me for a bunch of years, and you were super helpful for me in this, right? Because I'd have all my preconceived notions and a swirl of a mess going on with copywriting. And then I'd get on a call with you and you could tell me, the truth of the industry, the truth of what people are looking for, the truth of my skills and the value. And even when I was like doing case studies and stuff, and it's like, okay, well, it's even more than just the monetary direct value from that. Like what's the value in these beyond like, hey, what's it going to make you next week? But like seeing that bigger picture. So I also like wanted to point out like, yeah, it's really just shining a light on the deeper truth of the situation and having somebody like you who can do that for people that can like burn a lot of it away. And then there still might be some deeper like stuff. It like doesn't, something's still in you, stopping you. It's like, okay, well, that's fine. That just means there's a bit more to explore. Like that stuff from childhood you were talking about. There's some older stuff, something like just hidden in the cracks and crevices of your mind that just got to explore more, shine a light on, and then it can start to unravel.
That's great. Yeah. And it's something I think you'd agree with because you touched on it a couple of times that have been the most consistent pieces of very typical advice that are truly effective when you're trying to work through something, taking a walk and journaling.
Yeah. That was another super helpful thing I got from Rhonda. It was like, if you're in that state, you're just not going to be making smart decisions when you're in that fear-based, doubting yourself. Is it good enough? I'm like, you're feeling that tension, that closing up, like it literally cuts off your executive functioning, the part of your brain that can like think and see possibilities. So we get stuck in this black and white thinking of I either need to have all these big numbers under my belt or no one's going to care about me. And exactly like you said, journal, take a walk, get out of that state, break that state, shake that up. For me, it's jujitsu. My life is falling apart. I go to jujitsu. Hey, I'm fine. It's fine. So yeah, like just noticing when you're in that state and having the discipline to like, oh, actually, maybe you don't need to be working on that sales page in that state. Maybe you go take a walk and maybe you approach that sales page more from a place of play and fun instead of all the pressure to do it well and all that stuff. And then you knock it out and you make those changes in 40 minutes instead of banging your head against the wall for 6 hours.
And that's so true. And that is a challenge a little unique to creative freelancers because we have all this pressure and we cannot do our best creative work when we're tight.
A lot of that pressure is self-imposed. It's about how we choose to view the situation.
Brian McCarthy, man, it's a thrill to talk to you again. And it's not surprising in many ways you're like the same exact person, but I love that you've taken this path and I can see how you've developed a lot of these skills. And I feel like you're really blossoming.
Well, thank you.
As a growth expert. So McCarthyMindsetCoaching.com and then go to /imposter to get Brian's guide specifically written for, let's call it creative freelancers, even more specifically copywriters to overcome imposter syndrome. Really appreciate it, man. Let's do this again soon.
Yeah, thank you. And there's some case studies in there as well, because there have to be based on my background.
Can't shake old habits.
Yeah. So there's more like tools and stuff that you get through those case studies and just like you can see more of the process. But yeah, thank you for having me, Kev. It's always wonderful to see you.
Likewise.
Hey, don't forget your goodies. Head over to copychief.com/copychiefradio to get some great free stuff to help you put the things you hear on the show into action for your business. copychief.com/CCR.